Move, Mom. My hand was already on the front door handle when she stepped directly in front of it. You're not going anywhere, she said. Vanessa has brunch. For a second, I actually thought she was joking. It was 7:12 in the morning. I was wearing the only blazer I owned, holding a folder with 3 copies of my resume, and my final interview at Asterin Hospitality Group started at 9. Her brunch can happen another day, I said. My interview can't. Dad walked in from the kitchen, coffee in hand, and laughed. Girls like you don't get lives, Tracy. You get duties. Then the doorbell rang. Vanessa swept inside wearing sunglasses on her head and carrying a diaper bag. She dropped it beside my shoes. They already ate, she said. I'll probably be back around 3. I'm not watching them. Vanessa didn't even answer me. She looked at Mom. That was when I understood nobody in that room expected my answer to matter. Mom folded her arms. If you walk out that door, don't expect to keep living under this roof. I looked at the front door, then at my resume folder. And for the first time in my life, I stopped asking permission. I turned toward the kitchen. Dad smirked behind me. Good, at least somebody's finally being sensible. He thought I was giving in. I crossed the kitchen, unlocked the back door, and stepped outside. Tracy, Mom shouted. I didn't turn around. I walked 2 blocks before ordering a rideshare because my hands were shaking too badly to type the address correctly the first time. By the time I reached Asterin's downtown office, I had 6 minutes left. The receptionist looked at my flushed face. Ms. Bennett. Yes. Your panel is ready. I straightened my blazer and walked in. That afternoon, while I sat in a coffee shop trying to figure out where I was going to sleep, my phone rang. Tracy Bennett. Yes. This is Asterin Hospitality Group. We'd like your references and final employment paperwork. I stared through the window. I had no home to go back to. But for the first time, I might have somewhere else to go. I stayed with an old college roommate. 2 days later, I returned for my clothes with a friend beside me, packed everything I owned into the trunk of her car, and started separating my bank account, phone plan, and life from my parents. Then 7 years passed. One afternoon, I was reviewing a hearing report when a surname stopped me cold. Vanessa Bennett. My sister had applied to Asterin. And now I had to decide whether the woman who once tried to cost me my future deserved a place inside the company that future eventually built. Getting the interview had not been the hardest part. Leaving my family was. For years, I had been the person everyone called when Vanessa needed something. I changed college classes because one of her kids had a doctor's appointment. I gave up Saturdays because her sitter canceled. I handed part of every paycheck to my parents for household expenses, while Vanessa borrowed money from them and rarely paid it back. So when Mom blocked the front door that morning, it wasn't one bad decision. It was the first time I refused the role they had already written for me. 3 days after the interview, Asterin called. We'd like to offer you a place in our management development program. I covered my mouth and sat down on the edge of my roommate's bed. The salary wasn't huge, but it was enough to rent a room, pay my own bills, and never ask my parents for permission again. Mom called the week I started. You embarrassed this family over babysitting. I stared at the cheap desk in my new room. I didn't leave over babysitting. Then what was it? You were willing to destroy my future for brunch. There was silence. Then Dad took the phone. You owe your sister an apology. No. Excuse me. No. I ended the call. After that, contact became occasional and predictable. Mom would call at Christmas and ask if I could watch Vanessa's kids. Dad would ask if I had extra money. Vanessa would text when she needed help with something urgent. Nobody asked what I was working on. So eventually, I stopped telling them. At Asterin, I moved from trainee to regional management, then into corporate operations. I became known for taking struggling properties and fixing them without automatically cutting the people doing the hardest work. 7 years after I walked out the back door, Human Resources sent me an unusual note. Possible family relationship identified in applicant screening. I opened the attached file. Vanessa Bennett, Operations Coordinator. I read the application twice, closed it, and called HR. Remove me from every decision involving this candidate. Vanessa got the interview without a single phone call from me. I made sure of it. Her application went through the same screening as everyone else's, and the hearing manager knew only that I had declared a family conflict and removed myself from the process. Vanessa interviewed well enough to earn an entry-level corporate operations position on her own. Then Mom called. Her voice was warmer than it had been in months. Your sister might finally be working with you. I leaned back in my chair. I heard she applied. She says it's a very good company. Maybe having you there will help her settle in. There it was. Vanessa knew I worked at Asterin, but apparently my family still assumed I occupied some ordinary management office somewhere in the building. HR will handle it, I said. Mom laughed, always so serious. I didn't correct her. When Vanessa received her offer, she announced it in the family group chat. Fresh start, officially joining Asterin. Congratulations flooded in. Then Dad wrote, maybe Vanessa can finally show Tracy how to enjoy life instead of making everything about work. I read it once and put my phone down. On Vanessa's first day, HR ran the standard orientation. One presentation introduced Asterin's leadership team, but they were behind schedule. The manager clicked through several slides before saying, we'll skip the executive profiles. You can review them on the employee portal. Vanessa never saw mine. Within days, though, she discovered Asterin operated differently from the family home. Deadlines mattered. Attendance mattered. Nobody covered unfinished work because she had somewhere more enjoyable to be. One afternoon, she joked to 2 coworkers that her sister worked somewhere upstairs. Maybe I've got connections, she said. One of them shook his head. Nobody gets special treatment here. Vanessa laughed. 3 weeks later, her department received a mandatory invitation to the quarterly operations meeting. Vanessa entered the conference room with her team and noticed the executive seating at the front. One chair remained empty. She leaned toward her manager. Who are we waiting for? He glanced toward the doors. You'll finally meet the person who owns this company. Vanessa straightened in her chair. Around her, employees opened laptops while hundreds more joined the quarterly meeting remotely. Senior executives took their places at the front, but the center chair remained empty. Vanessa leaned toward a coworker. Is the owner coming? Of course. She pictured some distant investor or aging founder she had never heard of. Then someone near the front said, Ms. Bennett wants the regional numbers ready. Vanessa glanced up. Bennett. Her coworker shrugged. The CEO. Vanessa almost laughed at the coincidence. Then the quarterly report appeared on the screen. Her eyes moved across the first page until one line stopped her. Expansion Strategy, Office of Tracy Bennett, Chief Executive Officer. Vanessa stopped breathing for a second. No, she whispered. Before she could ask anyone what she was seeing, the conference room doors opened. I walked in. Several executives stood. Morning, Ms. Bennett. Good morning. I took the empty center chair, opened my folder, and began. For the next 40 minutes, Vanessa barely moved. Regional directors twice my age answered my questions. I reviewed new locations, staffing targets, performance numbers, and advancement plans. 7 years earlier, our father had laughed when I said an interview could change my life. Now Vanessa was sitting in my company, listening to people report to me. She waited until the meeting ended, then caught me outside my office. Tracy, I stopped. Why didn't you tell me? Tell you what? That you were the CEO. I held her gaze. You never asked what I became. You only asked whether I could help you. Her face changed. My job, did you hire me? No, I removed myself from the process. Can you fire me? Your employment will be handled exactly like everyone else. She swallowed. Do Mom and Dad know? No. Before she could say anything else, my assistant opened the office door. Your acquisition documents are ready for signature, Ms. Bennett. Vanessa stared at me. Acquisition. Vanessa followed me into my office. What acquisition? She asked. I sat behind my desk and opened the folder my assistant had delivered. Another property group, Asterin is acquiring it. She looked around my office again, as if she were seeing everything for the first time. So you really own this company? I control it, yes. Then I told her what had happened during the 7 years she had never bothered to ask about. That final interview got me into Asterin's management development program. I moved into regional operations, then corporate leadership. When Asterin's founder decided to retire, several executives put together a management-led acquisition backed by outside investors. I invested much of the equity I had accumulated. Over the years that followed, restructuring and additional share purchases increased my stake until I became Asterin's controlling shareholder and CEO. Vanessa slowly lowered herself into the chair opposite me. All because you went to that interview. No, I said, because I went to the interview and kept going afterward. She looked down. That evening, my phone started ringing. Mom. Dad. Mom again. I let several calls pass before finally answering. Dad spoke first. Vanessa says you own Asterin. Yes. You own the company she works for. Yes. Silence. Then Mom's voice suddenly became almost cheerful. Tracy, sweetheart, we always knew you were intelligent. Your father and I always said you were going places. I looked toward the old resume folder I still kept inside my desk drawer. You stood in front of the door. Another silence. Mom lowered her voice. That was 7 years ago. Dad jumped in. It was a family disagreement, Tracy. Families argue. You told me girls like me don't get lives. We get duties. Remember. He said nothing. For once, there was no lecture waiting for me. Then Mom tried another approach. Well, now that we know the situation, maybe you can help Vanessa. She has children. A promotion would give her more security. I almost smiled. 7 years had passed, and somehow we were standing at the same door again. Vanessa's convenience on one side. My boundaries on the other. No. Mom went quiet. No. Vanessa will receive whatever salary, reviews, promotions, and opportunities she earns, exactly like every other employee. But she's your sister. That's why I removed myself from her hearing process, and that's why I won't interfere now. I ended the call without arguing. Vanessa stayed. At first, she struggled with the fact that my name couldn't rescue her from deadlines or earn her better assignments. But several months later, she completed her first major project successfully. Her manager congratulated her. Not me. She earned it. Our relationship didn't magically become close. Too much had happened for that, but something changed between us. Vanessa stopped treating my time like something she was automatically entitled to, and I stopped allowing our parents to turn every conversation into a demand. Mom and Dad occasionally tried anyway. Money. Help. Suggestions that successful daughters were supposed to take care of family. My answer remained the same whenever the request crossed my boundaries. No. Vanessa continued at Asterin under a separate executive chain, so I never directly supervised her. And my parents lost the one thing they had relied on for most of my life. Control. They couldn't threaten me with their house anymore. They couldn't make Vanessa's plans more important than mine. They couldn't define what kind of life I was allowed to have. I still keep the folder from that interview in my office drawer. The corners are worn now. Sometimes I see it when I'm looking for something else, and I remember being 24 years old, standing in that hallway while my mother blocked the front door and my father laughed at the idea that my future mattered. 7 years earlier, my family blocked that door because they believed my sister's brunch mattered more than my future. So I took the back door and built a future big enough that one day, my sister walked into it as my employee.